I arrived at K-47 Airfield on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, when the Nevada desert was still baking under a sun that felt like it had a personal vendetta against anything living. The heat shimmered off the tarmac in waves, making the distant mountains look like they were melting into the sky. I'd taken a Greyhound from Reno, then caught a ride with a supply truck driver who didn't ask questions, which was good because I wasn't in the mood to explain why a 30-year-old mechanic with decent credentials was willing to take a job in the middle of nowhere for barely above minimum wage. The answer was simple, really. I'd spent the last 18 months in Nevada State Prison for a crime I'd rather not detail here. Let's just say it involved cars that weren't mine and a judgment error fueled by desperation and cheap whiskey. I'd served my time, kept my head down, and walked out with a promise to myself that I'd never go back. But freedom came with its own challenges. Nobody wanted to hire an ex-con, no matter how good I was with engines. K-47 was the first place that didn't immediately hang up when they heard about my record. The airfield itself looked like something out of a Cold War relic catalog. A single runway stretched across the desert floor, flanked by a dozen hangars of varying sizes, most of them showing rust and weather damage. The main office was a low-slung concrete building with narrow windows, and a faded sign that read K-47 Private Airfield, authorized personnel only. There were no other buildings in sight, just endless desert scrub and the occasional Joshua tree reaching toward the cloudless sky like skeletal hands. I hauled my duffel bag into the office where a wall-mounted air conditioning unit struggled against the heat with a rattling wheeze. Behind a metal desk sat a woman who looked to be in her late 40s with dark hair pulled into a severe ponytail and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She looked up from a clipboard and studied me with an expression that wasn't quite welcoming but wasn't hostile either. "James Walker?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Jimmy," I corrected. "Nobody calls me James except my parole officer. I'm Nina Reeves, shift supervisor." She stood and extended a hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike. "You'll be working nights, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. We service private aircraft, mostly cargo runs, and wealthy folks who prefer to fly under the radar, if you catch my meaning. Day shift handles the commercial traffic, which isn't much. Night shift is just you and whatever planes need work." "Just me?" I asked, glancing around the empty office. "Budget cuts," Nina said with a shrug. "We used to have 3 mechanics on nights. Now it's 1. 3. The work isn't constant. Some nights you'll be busy, others you'll be sitting on your hands. But you need to be here regardless in case something comes up." She walked me through the office, showing me the break room with its ancient coffee maker and a refrigerator that hummed like it was considering giving up entirely. The mechanics' quarters were adjacent, a small room with a cot, a locker, a desk, and another struggling air conditioner. It wasn't much, but I'd lived in worse. Prison cells don't come with windows or the illusion of privacy. "You'll find your tools in the maintenance shed," Nina continued, leading me back to the main office. "We've got most of what you'll need, but if you've got your own kit, that's fine too. Just keep track of everything. Equipment has a habit of walking off if you're not careful." She pulled a crumpled sheet of paper from a drawer and set it on the desk between us. "These are the rules. Read them. Follow them. Don't ask why." But I picked up the paper and scanned the list written in faded typewriter text. "Rules for Night Mechanics, K-47 Airfield. Rule 1, never under any circumstances open Hangar 13 after midnight. Rule 2, if you hear a plane engine running without a pilot, do not go near it. Rule 3, if the lights on the runway flicker, leave the airfield immediately. Do not return until sunrise. Rule 4, never touch the fuel tanks. If they've been tampered with, you must report it and leave immediately. Rule 5, If someone knocks on the mechanic's door after midnight, you must not open it, even if they claim to be an employee or a pilot. I read through the list twice, then looked up at Nina with what I'm sure was a bemused expression. Is this a joke? No, she said flatly. Come on. Don't open Hangar 13 after midnight? What is this, a haunted house attraction? Nina's expression didn't change. Those rules exist for a reason. Follow them and you'll be fine. Ignore them. She let the sentence trail off, then collected the paper and slid it into a plastic sleeve before handing it back to me. Keep this with you. Post it somewhere you'll see it every night. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to ask what kind of operation I'd stumbled into. But I needed this job. I needed the money, the fresh start, the chance to prove I could hold down something legitimate. So I nodded and tucked the paper into my jacket pocket. Fine. Don't open the spooky hangar. Don't investigate phantom planes. Run away if the lights flicker. Got it. I'm serious, Jimmy, Nina said. And for the first time I heard something in her voice that made me pause. Something that sounded like genuine concern or maybe fear. People who don't follow the rules, they don't last long here. What happens to them? She looked at me for a long moment, then turned away. Your shift starts at 11. Be ready. I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the airfield, trying to get a sense of the layout. The hangars were numbered sequentially, with Hangar 13 sitting at the far end of the runway, isolated from the others. It was larger than the rest, with heavy steel doors that looked like they belonged on a bank vault. There were no windows, no markings except the faded number painted on the door. Something about it felt wrong, though I couldn't articulate why. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed darker around it, or the way the air felt heavier the closer I got. I didn't go near it. Not yet. The sun set quickly in the desert, the sky turning from blue to orange to deep purple in what felt like minutes. By the time I returned to the office, darkness had settled over K-47 like a heavy blanket. Nina was gone. Her shift ended. I was alone. At 11 p.m. sharp, I clocked in and settled into the mechanics' quarters, posting the rules on the wall above the desk where I couldn't miss them. The airfield was silent except for the occasional whisper of wind across the tarmac. No planes, no people, just me in the vast empty darkness of the Nevada desert. I told myself the rules were nonsense, the product of bored workers trying to scare the new guy. I told myself I'd taken worse risks than working at a quiet airfield with weird traditions. But as midnight approached and the silence deepened, pressing against the thin walls of my quarters like something alive, I found myself glancing at the rules again and again, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there in the darkness was watching, waiting to see if I'd follow them. My first night passed without incident. I spent most of it familiarizing myself with the tool inventory, checking the maintenance logs and drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil filtered through an old sock. By 7 a.m., when the sun crept over the horizon and painted the desert in shades of gold and rust, I felt relieved. The rules seemed like exactly what I'd suspected. Superstitious nonsense designed to spook newcomers. I reported to Nina when she arrived for her day shift, confirming that nothing had required my attention overnight. She nodded, looking almost disappointed, though I couldn't tell if that was because nothing had happened or because she'd expected me to do something stupid. Good, she said. Keep it that way. I slept through most of the day in the mechanics' quarters, the air conditioner struggling against the afternoon heat. When I woke around 6 p.m., I grabbed dinner from the vending machine in the break room, a sad sandwich that had probably been there since the Bush administration, and watched the sunset through the office windows. My second night started the same as the first. I clocked in at 11, checked the maintenance schedule, empty, and settled in with a book I'd brought from Reno. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Midnight came and went. Nothing happened. I was beginning to relax when, at approximately 12:47 a.m., the runway lights flickered. It was subtle at first, a brief dimming, like a brownout. I glanced up from my book, watching through the window as the lights steadied. Probably just a power fluctuation, I thought. Old equipment in an old facility. Nothing to worry about. Then they flickered again, longer this time. The lights stuttered like a heartbeat. On, off, casting the runway in alternating bands of harsh white and deep shadow. A low hum began to vibrate through the walls of the office, a frequency I felt more than heard, settling into my bones and making my teeth ache. Rule 3 came back to me with uncomfortable clarity. If the lights on the runway flicker, leave the airfield immediately. Do not return until sunrise. I stood, my book forgotten, and walked to the window. The lights continued their arrhythmic flickering, and now I could see that it wasn't affecting all of them uniformly. The pattern seemed to be moving, starting from the far end of the runway near Hangar 13 and progressing toward the office like a wave of darkness consuming the light. The rational part of my brain insisted there was a logical explanation. Electrical systems failed all the time. This was probably just a fault in the relay system or a problem with the generator. I could check it out, maybe fix it, prove that these rules were nothing but paranoid nonsense. But the other part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive in prison, the part that had learned to trust instinct over reason, was screaming at me to get out. The lights went dark completely. The sudden blackness was absolute, swallowing everything beyond the office windows. Even the stars seemed dimmed, as if something had drawn a curtain between the airfield and the rest of the universe. The hum grew louder, and now I could distinguish another sound beneath it. A whistling, like wind through a narrow gap, except there was no wind. The air had gone completely still. Then I heard the engine. It came from somewhere out on the runway. The unmistakable roar of an aircraft engine spinning up. I pressed my face to the window, trying to see through the darkness, but the office's interior lights reflected on the glass, turning it into a mirror. I flipped the light switch, plunging the office into darkness, and looked again. There, perhaps 200 yards away, I could make out the silhouette of a plane. It was a small aircraft, maybe a Cessna or similar single-engine model, sitting on the runway with its propeller spinning. The engine sound was clear, powerful, steady, but there were no lights, no navigation lights, no interior cabin lights, nothing. Just a dark shape with a spinning propeller sitting motionless on the darkened runway. Rule 2. If you hear a plane engine running without a pilot, do not go near it. I grabbed my flashlight from the desk and, against every instinct and every rule, stepped outside. The night air was cold, much colder than it should have been for September in Nevada. My breath fogged in front of my face, and I could feel goosebumps rising on my arms despite my jacket. The whistling sound was louder out here, seeming to come from multiple directions at once, and the hum had become an almost subsonic pulse that made my chest feel tight. I clicked on the flashlight and aimed it toward the plane. The beam seemed weak, barely penetrating the darkness, but I could see the aircraft more clearly now. It was definitely a Cessna, older model with faded paint and registration numbers I couldn't quite make out. The propeller was spinning at full speed, the engine roaring, but there was no one in the cockpit. The door hung open, swinging slightly in an unfelt breeze. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and foolish in the vast darkness. "Is anyone there?" No response. Just the engine and the whistling and the hum. I took 3 steps toward the plane, then stopped. Something was wrong. The shadow beneath the aircraft was too dark, too deep, like a hole had opened in the runway. And the whistling. I realized now that it sounded like breathing, rapid and shallow, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The temperature dropped further. I could see my breath clearly now, and the metal of my flashlight was cold enough to hurt where my skin touched it. And then the engine stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It crashed down like a physical weight pressing against my eardrums, making me acutely aware of my own heartbeat thundering in my chest. The plane sat motionless, its propeller still, its door hanging open like a mouth. I ran. I don't remember making the decision. My legs simply moved, carrying me back toward the office with a speed I didn't know I still possessed. I slammed through the door, locked it behind me, and stood in the darkness with my back pressed against it, breathing hard, waiting for... I didn't know what. Minutes passed. The hum faded. The whistling stopped. When I finally worked up the courage to look out the window again, the runway lights were back on, steady and bright, illuminating an empty stretch of tarmac. The plane was gone. There was no sign it had ever been there, no tracks, no disturbance, nothing. I checked my watch, 1:23 a.m. The entire incident had lasted less than 40 minutes, but it had felt like hours. I spent the rest of the night in the office, keeping the lights on, jumping at every small sound. When Nina arrived at 7 a.m., she took one look at my face and nodded slowly. "You saw something," she said. It wasn't a question. "The lights flickered," I replied, my voice hoarse. "And there was a plane, on the runway. But there was no pilot. Did you leave, when the lights flickered?" "No," I admitted. "I stayed. I went out to investigate." Nina closed her eyes briefly and I saw her jaw tighten. "But you didn't approach the plane." "I started to, but then I ran. I came back to the office." She opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression that might have been relief or might have been disappointment. "That's the only reason you're still here to tell me about it. The rules aren't suggestions, Jimmy. They're not workplace safety guidelines. They're survival instructions." "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. "What was that thing?" "I don't know," Nina said quietly. "None of us do. We just know that the rules work. People who follow them survive. People who don't." She gestured vaguely. "They don't." I wanted to press her for more information, but something in her expression told me I wouldn't get it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Get some sleep," she said finally. "If you decide not to come back tonight, I understand. But if you do come back, remember, the rules exist for a reason." I went to my quarters, but I didn't sleep. I lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile what I'd seen with any rational explanation. By the time evening came, I'd convinced myself that I'd experienced some kind of hallucination, maybe carbon monoxide from a faulty heater, or dehydration, or stress from adjusting to night shifts. But when I checked the maintenance logs from previous nights, I found entries I'd missed before. Brief notes written in different hands. "Lights flickered. Left at 1:15 a.m. Returned at sunrise. No issues. Engine sounds from runway. Did not investigate. Followed Rule 2. Saw movement near H13. Stayed in office. Nothing to report." The entries went back years, dozens of them, all following the same pattern. Different mechanics, different incidents, but always the same conclusion. Follow the rules. Survive the night. I returned to work that night at 11 p.m. I posted the rules on the wall again, this time reading them with genuine respect rather than skepticism. And I promised myself that whatever happened, whatever I saw or heard, I would follow them exactly. It was a promise I would later come to regret. I made it through the next week without incident. The runway lights stayed steady. No phantom planes appeared. The nights were quiet, almost peaceful, and I began to settle into the rhythm of the graveyard shift. The long stretches of silence, the cold coffee, the paperwork that seemed designed to consume time rather than serve any practical purpose. On my 9th night, I met Eddie Thornton. He arrived around midnight, letting himself into the office with a key I didn't know anyone else possessed. He was maybe 55, built like someone who'd spent his life doing physical labor, with gray hair cropped short and hands that were more callous than skin. He wore oil-stained coveralls and carried a toolbox that looked older than me. "You must be the new kid," he said, extending a hand. "Eddie. I work day maintenance, but I had to pull a double. Got a Beechcraft Baron coming in around 2 that needs an engine overhaul before morning." I shook his hand, grateful for the company. "Jimmy, you work here long?" 12 years, Eddie said, setting his toolbox down and helping himself to coffee. "Seen 'em come and go. Night mechanics don't usually last more than a few months. Either they quit or—" He made a vague gesture. "Or what?" "Or they quit," Eddie repeated, but his eyes said something different. "You seem like you're still here, though. That's something." We talked while he prepped his tools, and I found myself relaxing in his presence. Eddie had a practical, no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of the old mechanics I'd worked with before my incarceration. He didn't seem like the type to believe in ghost stories or superstitious rules. "Nina give you the speech yet?" he asked, glancing at the rules posted above my desk. "The big scary warning about following the rules or you'll disappear into the desert or whatever?" "Yeah," I said carefully. She seemed pretty serious about it. Eddie snorted. "Nina's been here too long. This place gets in your head if you let it. Desert, isolation, night shifts. It's a perfect recipe for paranoia. People see things that aren't there, hear things in the wind, and suddenly everything's a supernatural threat." He tapped the side of his head. "It's all up here. Your brain trying to make sense of nothing." "What about the previous mechanics, the ones who didn't last?" "Most of them quit because the job's boring as hell and the pay's shit," Eddie said. "A couple got fired for not showing up. One guy, what was his name, Marcus, he just took off one day, left all his stuff. Probably found better work in Vegas." He shrugged. "Point is, there's always a rational explanation. Flickering lights, old electrical systems, strange sounds, desert wind, coyotes, planes from other airfields, Hangar 13. He laughed. "That's probably where they store equipment they don't want touched. Make up a spooky story, keep people out, basic security through superstition." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. The alternative was that I was working at a place where reality occasionally decided to take a coffee break and let something else take over. The Beechcraft arrived at 2:14 a.m., landing smoothly despite the late hour. The pilot was a tired-looking man in his 40s who barely acknowledged us before heading to the office to sleep while we worked. Eddie and I spent the next 3 hours replacing a cylinder assembly and checking the fuel system. It felt good to work with my hands again, to focus on something tangible and mechanical. We finished around 5:30 just as the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Eddie wiped his hands on a rag and surveyed our work with satisfaction. "See," he said, "normal job, normal work. Nothing weird, nothing scary, just metal and oil and honest labor." "What about Hangar 13, I asked, surprising myself with the question. "You ever been inside?" Eddie's expression shifted just for a moment, a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Then he smiled. "Sure, couple times. It's just storage, old parts and decommissioned equipment, some aircraft that haven't flown in decades, nothing exciting." "After midnight?" He hesitated. "No, never after midnight. But that's just because there's no reason to. The hangar's not climate-controlled, and fumbling around in the dark with old equipment is a good way to hurt yourself." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Stop worrying about the boogeyman, kid. You'll live longer." Eddie left around 6 a.m., and I spent the last hour of my shift cleaning up and filing the maintenance report for the Beechcraft. When Nina arrived at 7, I mentioned that I'd worked with Eddie, and she nodded approvingly. "Eddie's good," she said, "knows his stuff, but don't let him convince you the rules don't matter. He said he's been inside Hangar 13. Nina's expression darkened. "During the day, I'm sure that's fine. It's after midnight that—" She trailed off, then shook her head. "Just remember what I told you." I slept poorly that day, my dreams full of spinning propellers and dark shapes moving across empty runways. When I woke around 5 p.m., I had 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I called it back, and Eddie answered. "Hey, Jimmy, listen, I need a favor. That Beechcraft pilot just called, says the engine's making a weird noise. I'm stuck in Carson City dealing with a family thing, won't be back until tomorrow. Can you take a look? I'd really appreciate it." I agreed, though it meant starting my shift an hour early. When I arrived at the airfield at 10 p.m., the Beechcraft was parked near Hangar 7, exactly where we'd left it. I ran through a series of checks and found a loose mounting bolt that was causing vibration. Simple fix, 5 minutes of work. I was finishing up when Eddie's truck pulled into the parking area. "Thought you were in Carson City?" I called out. Eddie climbed out, looking sheepish. "Family thing resolved faster than expected. Figured I'd come back, make sure you didn't need help." He checked over my work, nodded approvingly, then glanced at his watch. "Almost 11. You heading in?" "Yeah. You?" "Think I'll stick around for a bit," Eddie said. His tone was casual, but something about it set off alarm bells in my head. "Maybe poke around some of the hangars, see if there's any maintenance issues I should schedule for next week." "Eddie?" "Don't worry, kid, I'll stay out of your hair." He grabbed his toolbox from the truck and headed toward the far end of the airfield, toward Hangar 13. I should have stopped him. I should have reminded him about the rules, insisted that he leave, called Nina. But I was the new guy, and Eddie had 12 years of experience, and part of me still wanted to believe that he was right, that the rules were just superstition. I watched him walk away into the darkness, and I said nothing. My shift started at 11. I clocked in, made coffee, tried to focus on a maintenance manual. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut. I kept glancing at the clock. 11:15, 11:30, 11:45. At midnight exactly, I heard it. A scream. It came from the direction of Hangar 13, sharp and guttural and terrified. It cut through the night air like a knife, then stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that felt worse than the sound itself. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. The hangar loomed in the darkness, its steel doors slightly ajar. Eddie's toolbox lay on the ground nearby, tools scattered across the tarmac as if he'd dropped it in haste. The door was open maybe 2 feet, wide enough to slip through, but not enough to see what lay beyond. "Eddie?" I called out, my voice echoing. "Eddie, you okay?" No response. I approached the door slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run. Through the gap, I could see only darkness. Absolute, impenetrable blackness that seemed to absorb my flashlight beam rather than reflect it. The air near the hangar was cold, just like it had been on the runway when I'd seen the phantom plane. And there was that sound again, the whistling like rapid breathing coming from inside the hangar. "Eddie!" Still nothing. I reached for the door, intending to push it open further, when it slammed shut on its own. The sound was like a gunshot, making me stumble backward. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked, or sealed, or held by something I couldn't see. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, calling Eddie's name, trying the door, shining my flashlight through the narrow windows near the roof. But I saw nothing, heard nothing. Finally, I ran back to the office and called Nina. She answered on the second ring, her voice immediately alert. "What happened?" Eddie, he went to Hangar 13 after midnight. He screamed and now he's gone and the door won't open. Stop, Nina said firmly. Take a breath. Tell me exactly what you saw. I told her everything. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Nina, I'm coming in, she said finally. Don't go near the hangar. Don't try to open it. Just stay in the office until I get there. She arrived 40 minutes later, pulling into the parking lot with her headlights cutting through the darkness. By then, the sky was beginning to show the faintest hint of dawn. We walked to Hangar 13 together and Nina tried the door. It opened easily. Inside was exactly what Eddie had described. Old parts, decommissioned equipment, aircraft in various states of disassembly. Dusty, cluttered, but ordinary. There was no sign of Eddie, no sign of a struggle. His toolbox was still on the ground outside, but the tools had been arranged. Set in a neat line, organized by size, as if someone had carefully placed them there. Where is he? I demanded. What the hell happened? Nina looked around the hangar slowly, her expression unreadable. I don't know, but I know he's not coming back. We have to call the police, file a missing person report. And tell them what? That a man disappeared from a locked hangar after midnight? That you heard him scream but found no evidence of violence? Nina shook her head. They'll investigate, find nothing, and eventually close the case. That's what always happens. Always? How many? Enough, Nina said quietly. Enough that I know better than to hope. We filed a report anyway. The police came, searched the hangar, interviewed me, checked Eddie's truck and his home. They found nothing. Eddie Thornton was listed as a missing person, and after a few weeks the investigation quietly stalled. His toolbox sat in the maintenance shed for another month before someone finally put it in storage. And I learned the most important lesson of K-47 Airfield. The rules weren't suggestions or superstitions or workplace guidelines. They were survival instructions written in the blood and disappearances of everyone who'd ignored them. Eddie's disappearance changed everything. The airfield felt different now, heavier, more oppressive, like the darkness beyond the office windows was waiting for me to make a mistake. I followed the rules religiously. When the runway lights flickered on my 14th night, I was in my truck and driving away within 60 seconds, not returning until the sun painted the desert gold. When I heard sounds that might have been engines or might have been something else, I stayed inside with the door locked. But following the rules wasn't enough anymore. I needed to understand what was happening at K-47, needed to know what I was really dealing with. Superstition and folklore were one thing. Watching a man disappear into a hangar was another entirely. I started in the office filing cabinets. Nina kept meticulous records, maintenance logs, incident reports, personnel files going back decades. During my breaks, while the desert night pressed against the windows, I went through everything I could find. The files painted a picture that was both mundane and deeply disturbing. K-47 had opened in 1952 as a military support facility during the Korean War. After the war, it had been decommissioned and sold to private ownership, eventually becoming the civilian airfield it was today. The ownership had changed hands multiple times over the years, but the operation had remained essentially the same, a quiet, remote facility servicing private aircraft. The incident reports were more interesting. They went back to 1959 and they all followed similar patterns. June 14, 1959, night mechanic Thomas Ridley reported hearing unusual sounds from Hangar 13. Did not investigate. No follow-up required. September 3, 1962, runway lights experienced power fluctuation. Night mechanic departed as per protocol. Electrician found no faults in system. March 22, 1967, night mechanic David Pohl reported seeing unscheduled aircraft on runway. No aircraft on record for that evening. No explanation found. The reports continued chronologically, sometimes months apart, sometimes within days of each other. Some mechanics reported multiple incidents, others never reported anything unusual. But there was a pattern I couldn't ignore. Approximately once every 2 years, a night mechanic would simply disappear. The circumstances varied. Some vanished during their shifts, others never reported for work one night and were never seen again. But the result was always the same. No bodies, no evidence, no resolution. Eddie was the 17th disappearance since 1959. I found the personnel files next, and that's when things got really interesting. One file, dated 1994, belonged to a mechanic named Robert Chen. According to the paperwork, Chen had worked at K-47 for 8 months before disappearing in October of that year. But unlike the others, Chen's file contained additional materials, photocopies of pages from what appeared to be a personal journal. I took the photocopies back to my desk and read them under the harsh fluorescent lights. August 2nd, 1994. Third week on the job, still getting used to the night schedule. The isolation is worse than I expected. Sometimes hours go by without seeing another person, without hearing anything except the wind. Nina gave me the rules on my first day. I thought she was hazing me, but after talking to the day crew, I think she was serious. They all have stories, things they've seen or heard, near misses with whatever lurks here after dark. I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in being careful. August 15th, 1994. Saw something strange tonight. Around 2 a.m., I was doing a routine check of the perimeter when I noticed someone standing near Hangar 13. Just standing there, motionless, facing the hangar door. I called out, but they didn't respond. I got closer, maybe 50 feet away, and realized they were wearing an old flight suit, the kind mechanics wore back in the 60s or 70s. The person turned to look at me, and I swear to God I could see through them. Not completely, but like they were made of fog or smoke. I remembered Rule 3 and looked up at the runway lights. They were flickering. I ran back to the office, got in my truck, and drove until sunrise. When I came back, there was no one there. No footprints, no sign anyone had been standing where I'd seen them. Nina asked if I saw anything. I told her about the lights. She just nodded and said I'd done the right thing. September 7th, 1994. I've been going through old maintenance logs. There are gaps, periods where no one logged anything for days or weeks. I asked Nina about it, and she got really quiet. Finally, she told me that some mechanics just stop showing up. They don't quit, don't call in sick. They just vanish. She said it's been happening since before she started working here in 1986. I asked her why she stays. She said someone has to keep watch. Someone has to make sure people follow the rules. I'm starting to think this place is a lot more than just a remote airfield. September 28th, 1994. I heard the knocking tonight. Rule 5. If someone knocks after midnight, don't open the door. It started around 1:30 a.m., soft at first, then louder. A voice called my name. Robert, I need help. Please open the door. I didn't recognize the voice, but it sounded desperate. I almost opened it. My hand was on the doorknob when I remembered the rule. I asked who it was, and the voice said, "It's Marcus Reyes. I used to work here. I'm hurt, please. You have to let me in." I looked up Marcus Reyes in the personnel files after. He was a night mechanic in 1987. He disappeared one October night and was never found. Whatever was knocking, it wasn't Marcus Reyes. October 11th, 1994. I think I'm being watched, not by people, by the airfield itself. Sometimes I catch movement in my peripheral vision, shadows that don't belong, reflections in the windows that show things that aren't there. The hangar 13, seems to draw my attention. I find myself staring at it, wanting to know what's inside, what's behind those doors. Nina warned me about this. She said the place calls to people, tries to make them break the rules. She said the ones who disappear aren't taken. They go willingly because they stop fighting the pull. I'm fighting it. But it's getting harder. October 18th, 1994. I made a mistake tonight. The knocking came again, but this time it was different. It was my sister's voice, Sarah. She died 3 years ago in a car accident, and I heard her voice clear as day, saying she needed me, saying she was scared and alone, and why wasn't I helping her? I opened the door. There was no one there, just the empty parking lot and the darkness and the cold. But I heard her voice again coming from the direction of Hangar 13, calling my name, begging me to come find her. I took 3 steps toward the hangar before I realized what I was doing. Rule 1. Never open Hangar 13 after midnight. I was halfway there, walking toward it like a man in a trance. I ran back to the office. My hands are still shaking as I write this. They know my name now. They know what will make me break the rules. October 25th, 1994. I can't sleep during the day anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see the hangar, I hear Sarah's voice. Nina says I should quit, that I'm too deep now, whatever that means. But I need to understand what this place is. I need to know what's in that hangar. I found old blueprints in the archives. Hangar 13 isn't just a hangar. It's built over something. The foundation goes down much deeper than it should, and there are rooms or chambers beneath it that aren't marked on any official plans. Whatever K-47 was built for, it wasn't just to service aircraft. I'm going to go in. I'm going to open Hangar 13 and see what's inside. But I'm going to do it during the day when the rules don't apply. I'm not stupid. I'll update this tomorrow. The journal ended there. According to the personnel file, Robert Chen disappeared on October 26, 1994. His truck was found in the parking lot, his belongings still in the mechanics' quarters. He never clocked out. He simply ceased to exist. A handwritten note was clipped to the file in Nina's handwriting. Hangar 13 was locked when I arrived at 7 a.m. Robert was not inside. His journal was found in his desk. No further investigation possible. I sat back, the photocopies spread across my desk, and felt the weight of 17 disappearances pressing down on me. Eddie's voice echoed in my memory. There's always a rational explanation, but there wasn't. Not for this. I looked up at the clock, 2:47 a.m. The runway lights were steady. The airfield was quiet, but somewhere out in the darkness beyond the thin walls of the office, something was waiting. And now, like Robert Chen, I was beginning to hear it call my name. I made it through the rest of that night on pure adrenaline and coffee that could strip paint. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound made me jump. By the time Nina arrived at 7 a.m., I'd probably aged 5 years. She took one look at me and at the photocopied journal pages spread across my desk, and her expression shifted from concern to something harder to read. Resignation, maybe, or grim understanding. You found Robert's journal, she said. It wasn't a question. You kept it in his file, I replied, gathering the pages. You wanted people to find it. I wanted people to understand what they're dealing with, Nina corrected. She poured herself coffee and sat across from me, her movements deliberate and tired. Understanding doesn't mean you can fight it or stop it. But it means you might be smart enough to survive it. What happened to him? To Robert Chen? Nina was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup like it held answers. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. My brother worked here before me. Marcus Reyes. The name hit me like a punch. The one from the journal, the one who disappeared in 1987, Nina finished. October 15th. He'd been working nights for 6 months. Good mechanic, practical guy, didn't believe in anything he couldn't take apart and put back together. She smiled sadly. We were close. When he vanished, I needed to understand. I needed to know what happened. So I took a job here. Jesus, Nina. I've been here 38 years, she continued, still not looking at me. I've seen 23 mechanics come and go. Most quit after a few weeks or months. Some last longer. A few. She finally met my eyes. A few disappear, like Marcus, like Eddie. And you just keep working here? Keep hiring people knowing what might happen? Someone has to, Nina said simply. If this place shut down, if we just walked away, it wouldn't end. The airfield would still be here, the rules would still exist. The things that live here, or exist here, or whatever they are, they'd still be waiting. At least this way I can warn people, I can give them a chance. A chance at what? Not dying? Not vanishing into some nightmare hangar? A chance to follow the rules and survive, Nina said firmly. That's all anyone gets at K-47. That's all I can offer. I wanted to argue, to rage, to demand better answers. But looking at Nina's tired eyes, seeing the weight of 38 years and 23 lost mechanics carved into her face, I understood. She was doing what she could with impossible circumstances. She was the guardian at the gate, keeping watch over something she couldn't defeat. Tell me about the airfield, I said instead. The real story. What is this place? Nina leaned back in her chair, considering. Most of what I know is pieced together from old records, journal entries like Robert's and my own experiences. K-47 was built in 1952, but it wasn't the first thing here. The military knew about this location, knew something was wrong with it. The official story is that they built the airfield as a support facility, but the real purpose was containment. Containment of what? I don't know exactly. The old reports, the ones I found buried in storage, written by people who are long dead, they reference dimensional instability and temporal anomalies. They talk about test subjects who disappeared and reappeared weeks later with no memory of where they'd been. They talk about sounds that don't match any known source, shadows that move independently, time that doesn't flow correctly. Nina shrugged. It sounds like science fiction, but whatever's happening here, it's real. The military tried to study it, tried to control it. They failed. Eventually, they just left. Sold the land, let it become a civilian operation, and classified everything. And the hangar? Hangar 13? Nina's expression darkened. That's where it's strongest. Whatever K-47 was built over, whatever exists here, Hangar 13 is the epicenter. The military built it with special materials, reinforced walls, sealed doors. They thought they could lock it away. But you can't lock away something that exists outside normal space and time. Robert's journal mentioned rooms beneath the hangar. There are, Nina confirmed. I've been down there once. Once was enough. She paused, and I could see her remembering something unpleasant. The rooms don't follow normal geometry. Distances change. There are doors that lead nowhere or that lead to places that shouldn't exist. I saw... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you never go in there, especially after midnight. What happens after midnight? Why is that the threshold? I don't know if it's actually about midnight specifically or if it's just when things are most active. The incidents, the disappearances, they almost always happen between midnight and sunrise. Maybe something about darkness or human circadian rhythms or the Earth's rotation affects whatever exists here. Nina laughed without humor. I've had 38 years to theorize, and I'm no closer to understanding than when I started. But you know the rules work. Yes, the rules work. Nina reached into her pocket and pulled out her own copy of the rules, worn and laminated. I don't know who first wrote them down. or how they figured out what works and what doesn't. But I know that everyone who follows them survives, and everyone who breaks them. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. We sat in silence for a moment, the morning sun beginning to warm the office through the windows. Outside, the airfield looked ordinary, peaceful, just another desert facility baking under the Nevada sun. It was hard to reconcile that image with the nightmare I'd experienced over the past 3 weeks. Why did Robert go into the hangar? I asked. He knew the rules. He was fighting the pull. What made him finally break? Nina pulled out Robert's file and flipped to a page I hadn't seen, a police report from October 27, 1994. His sister Sarah died in a car accident in 1991. He never got over it. The night he disappeared, 911 received a call from the K-47 office phone at 11:47 p.m. The caller said, she checked the report. She's here. Sarah's here. I can hear her in the hangar. I have to get her out. My blood went cold. It used his sister's voice. Whatever exists here, it learns. It watches, it listens, it finds what will break you. Marcus, my brother, the last entry in his truck logbook said he heard our mother calling for help. Our mother had been dead for 2 years. Nina closed the file. The rules protect you from a lot of things, but they can't protect you from yourself. If you want something badly enough, if you're vulnerable enough, it will use that. It will call you in a voice you can't ignore. What do I do? I asked, hearing the desperation in my own voice. How do I survive this? Nina looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. You follow the rules. You don't investigate. You don't try to understand. You do your job, you keep your head down, and when your shift ends, you leave. She stood, preparing to start her day. And if you hear someone you love calling from the darkness, you remember that they're dead or they're far away, and whatever's using their voice is not them. She paused at the door, looking back at me. There's one more thing Robert's journal didn't mention because I don't think he knew. The disappearances aren't random. They follow a pattern, roughly every 2 years, like clockwork. Eddie disappeared 3 weeks ago. Before him, it was a mechanic named Travis in 2022. Before that, someone else in 2020. What pattern? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. The intervals are getting shorter, Nina said quietly. In the 1960s, it was 3 or 4 years between disappearances. By the 80s, it was every 2.5 years. Now it's every 2 years, sometimes less. Whatever's here, it's getting stronger, or hungrier. And the rules. She touched the laminated card in her pocket. I don't know how much longer they'll be enough. She left me with that thought, closing the door gently behind her. I sat in the empty office as the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. I thought about quitting, about walking away and never looking back. I had a criminal record and limited job prospects, but working at K-47 had taught me something valuable. There were worse things than prison. There were worse things than poverty or failure or disappointment. There were places where the rules of reality bent, where darkness held intelligence, where the dead called your name. But I didn't quit. Maybe it was pride or stubbornness or the simple fact that I needed the money. Maybe it was something else, a morbid curiosity, a desire to understand, a compulsion I didn't fully recognize. Whatever the reason, I returned that night at 11 p.m. I posted the rules on the wall, made my coffee, and settled in for another shift. And in the darkness beyond the office windows, something that knew my name waited patiently for me to make a mistake. The weeks following my conversation with Nina were the longest of my life. Every night became an exercise in paranoia, every sound a potential threat. I followed the rules with religious devotion. When the lights flickered, I left. When I heard engines without sources, I stayed inside. When shadows moved in ways shadows shouldn't, I looked away. But the airfield was patient. Whatever existed there had time in abundance, and it was learning me just as it had learned all the others. It started subtly. I'd hear my name whispered on the wind, so faint I could almost convince myself it was imagination. I'd see movement in my peripheral vision, shapes that vanished when I turned to look directly at them. The temperature in the office would drop for no reason, my breath fogging in front of my face despite the struggling air conditioner pumping warm air. I documented everything in a notebook, following Robert Chen's example. Not because I thought it would help me understand, but because I needed to believe that understanding was possible. That there was some logic, some pattern I could decode and use to protect myself. November 3rd. Heard whispers near Hangar 7, stayed in office. Whispers stopped after 20 minutes. November 8th. Runway lights flickered at 1:23 a.m. Left airfield. Returned at sunrise, no other incidents. November 12th. Temperature drop in office at 2:15 a.m. Duration, 8 minutes. No accompanying phenomena. November 16th. Heard my name called 3 times. Source unknown, did not investigate. The pattern that emerged was simple and terrifying. The phenomena were escalating. What had started as occasional anomalies was becoming nightly routine. The airfield was pressing against me, testing my resolve, searching for weaknesses. On November 19th, I made a mistake. It was a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way. My shift had been quiet. No planes scheduled, no maintenance required. I'd spent most of the night reading and trying not to think about the darkness beyond the windows. Around midnight, I decided to do a routine perimeter check, walking the fence line to ensure nothing was amiss. The night was cold and clear, the stars sharp overhead. My flashlight cut through the darkness as I walked, checking gates and fence integrity. Everything was normal until I reached the eastern fence line near Hangar 13. There, Durdinatan, spray painted on the tarmac in fresh red paint, were 2 words, "Help me." The paint was still wet. I knelt down, touched it, confirmed it was real and recent. The letters were large, maybe 3 feet tall, clearly visible. Someone had been here within the last hour, possibly within the last few minutes. But that was impossible. The airfield had surveillance cameras, motion sensors, alarms. If someone had entered the property, I would have been notified. And who would sneak into a remote airfield in the middle of the night just to paint a message? I radioed Nina. She was off duty, but had given me her personal number for emergencies. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" "There's graffiti on the tarmac near Hangar 13, fresh paint. Someone's been here." A long pause. "What does it say?" "Help me." Another pause, longer this time. When Nina spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more alert. "Jimmy, listen carefully. Do not investigate. Do not look for whoever painted that. Go back to the office and stay there until sunrise." "But someone might be hurt. Someone might need—" "It's not real," Nina interrupted. "The message is for you. It's bait. Go back to the office. Now." I wanted to argue, but something in her tone convinced me. I returned to the office, locked the door, and waited. At 2:37 a.m., I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the building. I checked the security cameras, but they showed nothing. The footsteps continued for 30 minutes, then stopped. When Nina arrived at sunrise, we checked the tarmac together. The message was gone. The pavement was clean. No trace of paint or anything else. "It wasn't real," Nina confirmed. "It was never real. The airfield shows you things, manufactures scenarios designed to make you investigate, to make you go where you shouldn't. If you'd followed that message—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Followed it where?" "Toward Hangar 13. Always toward the hangar. That's where it wants you." I should have been more careful after that. I should have recognized the escalation for what it was, a countdown to something worse. But I was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline, my judgment eroded by weeks of sustained fear. The knock came on November 23rd at 12:47 a.m. I was at my desk working on maintenance reports when I heard it. A soft, polite knock on the office door. 3 taps, pause, 3 more taps. Rule 5 flashed through my mind. If someone knocks on the mechanic's door after midnight, you must not open it, even if they claim to be an employee or a pilot. I set down my pen and stared at the door. The knock came again, same rhythm, then a voice. "Jimmy, it's me. It's Nina. I need to talk to you." It sounded exactly like her. Same tone, same inflection, same slight rasp from years of smoking before she quit. I checked the security camera feed. Nothing. The parking lot was empty except for my truck. "Nina," I called out. "That you?" "Yes, it's me. Can you open the door? It's important." I stood, my hand moving toward the doorknob before I caught myself. Nina was at home. I'd talked to her on the phone less than an hour ago, confirming there were no scheduled arrivals tonight. She had no reason to be here, and if she were here, she'd have a key. "What's the authorization code?" I asked, remembering that Nina had told me she'd never come to the airfield after midnight without calling first and providing a code. Silence from the other side of the door. Then, "Jimmy, I don't have time for games. This is serious. Eddie's alive. I found him, but we need to go get him now before—" I stepped away from the door. "You're not Nina." The voice changed. It was still Nina's voice, but wrong somehow. The words coming too fast, the tone desperate in a way the real Nina would never allow herself to sound. "Please, Jimmy, please open the door. He's hurt. Eddie's hurt, and he's asking for you. We have to help him. You have to help him." My hand was on the doorknob. I don't remember deciding to move, don't remember crossing the distance from my desk to the door. I was just there, my fingers wrapped around the cold metal, ready to turn it. Eddie's face flashed through my mind. Eddie, who'd thought the rules were nonsense. Eddie, who'd disappeared into Hangar 13 and never come back. Eddie, who was dead or gone or worse. "If Eddie's alive, bring him here," I said, my voice shaking. Bring him to the door. He can't walk. He's hurt too badly. You have to come help me carry him. Then call an ambulance. There's no time. Please, Jimmy, please." The voice was crying now, and it sounded so real, so genuine, that part of me believed it. Part of me wanted to open the door, wanted to be the hero, wanted to save Eddie and prove that not everyone who came to K-47 was doomed. But I thought about Robert Chen, hearing his dead sister's voice. I thought about Marcus Reyes, hearing his dead mother. I thought about all the others who'd been called by voices they couldn't ignore, pulled toward Hangar 13 by promises and pleas and perfect replicas of people they loved. "You're not Nina," I said again, taking my hand off the doorknob. "And Eddie's not out there." The voice stopped crying. For a moment there was only silence. Then it spoke again, and this time it wasn't Nina's voice. It was something else, something that sounded like wind through metal, like machinery grinding, like voices layered on top of each other, speaking in unison. "You broke the rules, Jimmy. You opened the door before. November 12th, 3:17 a.m. You went outside to investigate a sound. The door was open for 47 seconds. I remembered. I'd heard what I thought was a plane in distress making strange noises near Hangar 7. I'd stepped outside, just onto the threshold, not even into the parking lot, to see if I could identify the source. I'd caught myself quickly, gone back inside, locked the door. 47 seconds. Had it really been that long? "You opened the door," the voice continued. "You broke the rule. So we can call you now. We can come to you now. The rules don't protect you anymore." "That's not—" "I didn't break the rule. The rule is about not opening the door when someone knocks. Nobody knocked that night. The rule is, you must not open it. You opened it. The rule is broken. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. You're lying. You're trying to make me think I'm not safe, trying to make me panic. We don't need you to panic, Jimmy. We just need you to understand. The rules were always temporary. Everyone breaks them eventually. Everyone comes to us eventually. You just decided to come sooner. The doorknob began to turn. I watched, paralyzed, as it rotated slowly, the lock clicking open despite the fact that I'd engaged the deadbolt. The door swung inward, revealing the parking lot beyond. Empty. There was nothing there. But the cold air that rushed in carried that smell I'd come to associate with the airfield's anomalies. Ozone and rust and something organic, like meat left too long in the sun. And underneath the smell was a sound, whispering. Dozens of voices whispering my name. I slammed the door shut and threw my weight against it. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. The doorknob rattled. Something, many somethings pressed against the other side, and I could feel the door bowing inward under the pressure. I held it for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My muscles screamed, my breath came in ragged gasps, and I kept thinking, this is it. This is how I disappear. This is how it ends. Then, abruptly, the pressure stopped. The whispering faded. The door went still under my hands. I stayed there until sunrise, braced against the door, not trusting the silence. When Nina arrived at 7 a.m., she found me still there, exhausted and terrified. She didn't ask what happened. She just looked at me, looked at the door, and nodded slowly. You held, she said quietly. That's more than most people manage. But I knew the truth. I'd broken the rules, even if only technically, and now something had changed. The barriers that protected me had weakened. The airfield knew I was vulnerable, and it was only a matter of time before it called me again, in a voice I couldn't refuse. I didn't sleep after that night. I tried. God knows I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard the whispering. Every time I started to drift off, I felt the pressure against the door, the cold air that smelled of rust and decay. Nina told me to take a few days off, to recover, but I refused. Taking time off felt like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that the airfield had won. Besides, I wasn't sure I'd come back if I left, so I kept working, kept following the rules, kept pretending that everything was manageable. But the airfield knew better. The phenomena escalated. Shadows coalesced into almost human shapes in my peripheral vision. The temperature drops became severe enough to frost the windows. Equipment moved on its own. Tools I'd left on one bench appearing on another. Maintenance logs reshuffling themselves, my coffee cup sliding across the desk when I wasn't looking. Nina watched me deteriorate with growing concern. On November 28th, she pulled me aside before my shift. You need to quit, she said bluntly. I've seen this before. You're too deep now. Whatever's here, it's fixated on you. I'm fine. You're not fine. You haven't slept in days. You're jumping at shadows and the airfield. She gestured vaguely at the tarmac beyond the windows. It's more active than I've ever seen it. Something's building. Something's about to happen. If I quit, someone else will take my place. Someone who doesn't know what I know, doesn't understand the rules. That's not your responsibility, Jimmy. Isn't it? I met her eyes. You stayed after your brother disappeared. You've been here 38 years, watching people vanish, trying to keep others safe. How is this different? Nina was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, Marcus was my brother. What's your excuse? I didn't have an answer. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the ex-con's pathological need to prove I could finish something, could stick to a commitment. Or maybe on some level I didn't want to examine too closely. I was tired of running. Prison had been about survival, about keeping your head down and your mouth shut. K-47 was different. Here, the threats were incomprehensible, the rules arbitrary, but at least they were knowable. At least I had some agency. "I'm working my shift," I said. Nina sighed. "Then be ready. I think tonight's going to be bad." She was right. The shift started normally enough. Clocked in at 11, checked the maintenance schedule, empty. Made coffee. But from the first minute, the atmosphere felt wrong. The air was too still, too heavy. The silence had weight to it, pressing down like physical pressure. Even the fluorescent lights seemed dimmer than usual, struggling against some invisible resistance. At 11:47 p.m., the phone rang. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "K-47 Airfield, Jimmy speaking." "Jimmy!" The voice was panicked, breathless. "Jimmy, this is Tower Control. We have an emergency. Aircraft inbound, pilots unresponsive. We're trying to talk him down, but we need someone on the ground ready for crash protocols." I grabbed a pen. "What's the aircraft ID?" "November 73 Bravo Charlie. Single-engine Cessna. ETA 12 minutes. "I'll prep the emergency equipment. Keep me posted." I hung up and immediately felt wrong about the call. K-47 didn't have a control tower. It was too small, too remote. All air traffic was handled by regional control out of Las Vegas, and the voice on the phone, while professional and urgent, had sounded off, too generic, like an AI-generated voice or an actor reading from a script. I called Nina. She answered immediately. "Did you get a notification about an inbound emergency?" I asked. "No. Nothing on the system. Why?" "I got a call from Tower Control about a Cessna in distress, but we don't have a tower." "Jimmy, listen to me very carefully." Nina's voice had gone flat, clinical. "Do not go outside. Do not prep any emergency equipment. Whatever called you, it wasn't real." "But what if it is real? What if there's actually a plane in trouble and I don't?" "There's no plane. This is what it does. It creates scenarios that make you feel responsible, that make you act. If you go outside now, if you break protocol..." She didn't finish the sentence. I looked out the window at the empty runway, the dark tarmac stretching away into deeper darkness. "Okay, I'll stay inside." "Good, I'm coming in. 20 minutes. She hung up. I put the phone down and tried to calm my racing heart. It was a test. Just another test. The airfield trying to trick me, trying to make me break the rules. At 11:59 p.m., the runway lights came on, all of them simultaneously, blazing with intensity I'd never seen before. The tarmac was illuminated like a football stadium, every crack and seam visible. And then they began to flicker. Not the slow, irregular flutter I'd seen before, but a rapid, rhythmic strobing that hurt to look at. Rule 3. If the lights on the runway flicker, leave the airfield immediately. I grabbed my keys and ran for the door, but when I tried to open it, the lock wouldn't turn. The deadbolt was engaged, and no matter how hard I twisted the key, it wouldn't budge. I tried the back door, same result. The emergency exit, sealed. I was locked in. Through the window I saw it, a plane descending from the night sky. It came in slowly, impossibly slowly, dropping through the air like a leaf falling through water. The engine sound followed, that roar I'd heard before, but wrong, distorted, as if I were hearing it through layers of interference. The aircraft was a Cessna, matching the description from the phone call, but as it descended, I could see that something was profoundly wrong with it. The wings were bent, angled upward in a way that should have made flight impossible. The fuselage was too long, stretched like taffy. The windows weren't windows at all, but dark voids, empty holes leading into deeper darkness. And the propeller was spinning the wrong direction, moving counter to every law of physics and mechanics. The plane touched down on the runway without a sound. No squeal of tires, no roar of reverse thrust, nothing. It simply settled onto the tarmac and began to taxi toward the office, moving without any visible means of propulsion. I backed away from the window, my mind screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The doors wouldn't open. I was trapped. The plane stopped maybe 50 feet from the office. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. They came out one by one, figures in mechanics' coveralls, their movements jerky and wrong like stop-motion animation. I couldn't see their faces. The distance and the strange quality of the light made everything seem to blur and shift. But I could see enough. There were 7 of them. No, 8. No more. The number kept changing as if my brain couldn't properly process what I was seeing. They stood in a line facing the office, facing me, and then I recognized them. Eddie was first. I knew him by his build, his distinctive gray hair. Next to him stood a tall figure that might have been Marcus Reyes, Nina's brother, who disappeared in 1987. The others were strangers, but I knew who they were. All the mechanics who'd vanished from K-47 over the decades. All the people who'd broken the rules or been called by voices they couldn't ignore. They weren't dead. They weren't alive. They were something else, something in between. And they were staring at me with empty eyes. One of them raised a hand and pointed at the office, at me. The others began to move forward. I ran to the back of the office, looking for any way out. The windows were too small to climb through, the doors wouldn't budge, and the walls were solid concrete. I was in a box with no escape. The figures reached the office door. I heard the doorknob rattle, heard that whispering sound I'd come to dread. They were trying to get in. And then, impossibly, I heard Nina's voice, her real voice, coming from my radio. "Jimmy, the fuel tanks, check Rule 4. I grabbed the laminated rules from my desk and scanned them frantically. Rule 4. Never touch the fuel tanks. If they've been tampered with, you must report it and leave immediately. "I'm locked in," I shouted into the radio. "I can't leave." "The auxiliary exit." Nina's voice was nearly drowned out by static. "Behind the filing cabinet, push through." I ran to the filing cabinet she'd indicated and threw my weight against it. It moved, revealing a narrow door I'd never noticed before. I yanked it open and found myself in a maintenance tunnel, cramped and dark, but it led away from the office. Behind me, I heard the office door give way, heard footsteps, heard voices whispering my name in chorus. I ran through the tunnel, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off concrete walls. The tunnel stretched for what felt like miles, but was probably only 100 yards, finally ending at a ladder leading up to a hatch. I climbed frantically, threw open the hatch, and emerged into the cold desert air. I was on the far side of the airfield near the perimeter fence. Behind me, I could see the office, see the impossible plane sitting on the runway, see the figures emerging from the maintenance tunnel in pursuit. And ahead of me, pulling up in her truck with emergency lights flashing, was Nina. "Get in!" she screamed. I ran and threw myself into the passenger seat. Nina gunned the engine and we crashed through the perimeter gate, metal shrieking as it gave way. She didn't slow down until we were 5 miles from K-47, pulled over on the shoulder of the empty highway. We sat in silence, both of us breathing hard, both of us trembling. "What the hell was that?" I finally managed. Nina didn't answer immediately. She was staring back toward the airfield, visible in the distance as a cluster of lights against the dark desert. "The end," she said quietly. That was the end. It's never manifested like that before. Never that strong, that physical. Whatever exists at K-47. She shook her head. "It's breaking through. The rules aren't enough anymore. What do we do?" Nina turned to look at me and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Defeat. "We don't go back," she said. "We call whoever we need to call, we report what happened, and we never go back to that airfield again." But even as she said it, we both knew it wasn't that simple. K-47 wasn't just an airfield. It was a thin place, a boundary between here and somewhere else. And boundaries don't disappear just because you stop watching them. As we drove away into the night, I looked back one last time. The lights of the airfield flickered once, twice, then went dark. And in that darkness, I swear I saw the plane take off, rising into the night sky, carrying its cargo of lost souls to wherever lost souls go when the rules no longer protect them. Nina and I spent that night in a motel in Tonopah, neither of us sleeping, both of us jumping at every sound. In the morning, we filed reports with the county sheriff, the FAA, and every other agency we could think of. We told them about Eddie's disappearance, about the phenomena, about the impossible plane and the figures that had emerged from it. The responses were exactly what Nina had predicted. The sheriff's department sent a deputy to check the airfield. He found everything locked and secure, no signs of disturbance, no evidence of the events we'd described. The FAA confirmed that no aircraft matching our description had been in the area. As far as the official record was concerned, nothing had happened at K-47 Airfield on November 28th. "They never believe," Nina said, staring at the formal response letters with dead eyes. "Or they do believe and they classify it, bury it, make it go away. Either way, nothing changes." We were at a diner in Reno, 1 week after the incident. Nina looked like she'd aged a decade in those 7 days. The weight of 38 years at K-47 had finally broken through her careful composure, leaving her hollowed out and exhausted. "What about the airfield?" I asked. "What happens now?" "The owners will hire someone new. They always do. They'll clean up, reset the equipment, post the rules, and bring in the next mechanic. And the cycle will continue." Nina stirred her coffee without drinking it. "Unless someone actually does something." "Does what?" "Closes it down permanently, seals the hangars, tears up the runway, makes it impossible to operate. Removes the human element that it feeds on." She looked up at me. "But that would require people in power to acknowledge that something impossible exists there. And people in power don't like acknowledging impossible things." I thought about the figures I'd seen. The lost mechanics pulled from their lives and transformed into something that existed in the spaces between reality. I thought about Eddie's laugh, his skepticism, his conviction that everything had a rational explanation. "What about Robert Chen?" I asked. "His journal said the hangar was built over something, that there were rooms underneath. What if we could—" "No," Nina interrupted firmly. "Whatever's under that hangar, whatever K-47 was built to contain, it's beyond us. The military tried to study it, tried to control it. They failed. We're just mechanics, Jimmy. We don't have the resources or the knowledge to fight something that's been there for God knows how long. So we just walk away? Let it keep taking people?" Nina's expression was pained. "What else can we do? We survived. That's more than most people manage. We can tell others, warn them, but—" She gestured helplessly. "Who's going to believe us?" She was right, of course. I knew she was right. But it still felt like failure, like abandoning everyone who came after us to face the same nightmare alone. We parted ways after that conversation. Nina said she was moving back to Portland, where she'd grown up, where her brother was buried in a cemetery with a headstone that marked an empty grave. I told her I'd probably head to California, try to find work in San Diego or LA, somewhere far from the desert and its secrets. But I didn't leave Nevada, not immediately. Instead, I spent weeks researching K-47, digging through military records, historical archives, anything I could access. What I found was fragmentary and heavily redacted, but it painted a picture. K-47 had been built on land that indigenous tribes had considered forbidden. The Paiute and Shoshone people had stories about the area dating back centuries, stories about hollow places where the world was thin, where spirits could cross over. where people who ventured too far might slip between the cracks of reality and never return. The military had discovered something during underground testing in 1951. The records called it a spatial anomaly, or sometimes a discontinuity. They'd built the airfield as cover for further research, using Hangar 13 as the primary research facility. But by 1958, the project was hastily shut down after what the records only referred to as the incident. 3 researchers had disappeared in a single night. The facility was sealed, the project classified, and the land quietly sold off. But the anomaly remained. Whatever existed at K-47 couldn't be destroyed or removed. It could only be contained, and that containment depended on human ignorance and human adherence to rules that were themselves barely understood. I tried to contact others who'd worked at K-47, tracking down former employees through public records. Most didn't respond. A few told me to stop asking questions. One, a day-shift mechanic who'd worked there in the 1990s, agreed to meet me. His name was Alan Burke, and he was 73 years old, living in a retirement community in Henderson. He listened to my story with knowing eyes, then pulled out a box of old photographs and documents. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said. "Someone always does. Someone who got close enough to see the truth but survived to ask questions." He spread the photographs on his dining room table. "I was there when Robert Chen disappeared. I was also there for 6 others. I kept records because I thought someday someone would need them." The photographs showed K-47 at different periods, the 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, and several of them I could see figures standing in the backgrounds near hangars or at the edges of the runway. The figures were blurred, indistinct but unmistakably human-shaped. "They're always there," Alan said. "The ones who didn't make it. They exist in the space between the airfield and wherever that place connects to. You can't see them most of the time, but cameras catch them occasionally, especially during high-activity periods." "Is there any way to help them? To bring them back?" Alan shook his head slowly. "I don't think they want to come back. I think they're part of it now, part of whatever exists there. They're not trapped, they're transformed. And transformation like that, I don't think it's reversible." He gave me copies of his records, made me promise to continue documenting, to preserve the knowledge for whoever came next. Then he said something that's haunted me ever since. "The rules buy you time, Jimmy. They keep you safe for a while, but K-47 is patient. It's been there for centuries, maybe longer. It can wait for you to make a mistake, to get tired, to let your guard down for just one moment. And when you do," he gestured at the photographs of the blurred figures, "when you do, it welcomes you home." I left Nevada 3 days later, driving west into California with everything I owned packed in my truck. I found work at a small airfield near Sacramento. Normal work with normal rules, where the only dangers were mechanical failures and human error. But I still have the documents. I still have the photographs. And sometimes late at night I think about K-47 sitting in the desert, its hangars dark, its runway empty, waiting for the next mechanic to arrive and learn the rules. I think about Nina, alone in Portland, carrying the weight of her brother's disappearance. I think about Eddie and Robert and Marcus and all the others whose names I learned from Alan's records. And I wonder, when does a job stop being a job and start being a sacrifice? When does following the rules stop being about survival and start being about feeding the thing that hunts you? I don't have answers. I just have the documents and the memories and the knowledge that somewhere in the Nevada desert, the rules are posted on a wall, waiting for someone new to read them. Waiting for the next person to learn that some places are thin, and some rules are written in blood, and some jobs come with a cost that no paycheck can ever justify. 6 months after I left K-47, I received a package. It arrived at the small apartment I'd rented in Sacramento, addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. There was no return address, just a postmark from Tonopah, Nevada. Inside was a single item, a worn notebook bound with electrical tape, pages yellowed with age. I recognized it immediately. It was my notebook, the one I'd kept during my time at K-47, documenting the phenomena, recording my observations. I'd left it in my locker at the airfield when Nina and I fled that last night. I'd assumed it was lost, but here it was, returned to me like a message. I opened it carefully. The entries I'd written were all there, my increasingly desperate handwriting chronicling the escalation of events. But at the end, on pages I'd left blank, someone had added a new entry. The handwriting was different, neater, feminine. January 15th. My name is Sarah Voss. I'm 28 years old, and I started working at K-47 Airfield 3 weeks ago. The supervisor, a woman named Diane, Nina's replacement, I assumed, gave me a set of rules on my first day. She said they were important, that I should follow them exactly. I thought she was joking. This is an airfield, not a haunted house. But on my third night, the runway lights flickered. I remembered Rule 3 and left, even though I felt stupid doing it. When I came back at sunrise, I found this notebook in the maintenance office on the desk where I'd been working. It was sitting in the exact center of the desk, like someone had carefully placed it there. I read through it, all of it. Jimmy, if you're reading this, if you get this package, I need you to know you were right. All of it was right. The rules, the phenomena, everything. Last night I heard knocking. A voice claiming to be my brother. My brother died 2 years ago in Afghanistan. The voice knew things only he would know. It begged me to open the door. I almost did. I had my hand on the doorknob when I remembered Rule 5. I don't know how long I can hold out. It's only been 3 weeks and already I feel like I'm losing my mind. How did you last as long as you did? I'm sending this to you because your address was in the personnel files. I'm sending it because I need you to know that it's still happening, still taking people, still waiting. And I'm sending it because if I disappear, when I disappear, I need someone to remember that I was here, that I tried to follow the rules, that I didn't want to go. Please remember. Sarah. The notebook ended there. I checked the postmark again, sent 4 days ago. I immediately tried to find information about Sarah Voss, searched social media, public records, anything. I found her easily enough. Sarah Voss, 28, mechanic, last known employment at K-47 Airfield in Nevada. Last seen, January 16th. Status missing. I called the Nye County Sheriff's Department and spoke to the deputy handling her case. He was sympathetic but unhelpful. Sarah had simply not shown up for her shift one morning. Her truck was still in the airfield parking lot, her belongings still in her locker, but she was gone. They'd searched the facility, found nothing. It was exactly like all the others. I thought about driving back to K-47, about investigating, about trying to find Sarah or at least document what had happened. But I knew it would be pointless. The airfield would show me nothing. The rules would still be posted on the wall, and Sarah Voss would be added to the list of names. The 17th disappearance, or maybe the 18th by now. Instead, I did what Alan Burke had asked me to do. I documented it. I added Sarah's note to the collection of records, photographs, and journal entries I'd accumulated. I created a digital archive and backed it up in multiple locations. I wrote down everything I could remember about K-47, every detail of the rules, every incident I'd witnessed or heard about. And then I did something else. I created a website, nothing fancy, just a simple page with a warning and the documentation. I listed the rules, included redacted versions of the journals, removing personal information, posted the photographs Alan had given me. At the top, I put a single message. If you're considering a job at K-47 Airfield in Nevada, read this first. If you're currently working there, follow the rules exactly. If someone you know has disappeared from K-47, you're not crazy and you're not alone. I didn't expect anyone to find it. But within a week, I received my first email. It was from a former day shift mechanic who'd worked at K-47 in 2015. He'd never experienced the phenomena directly, but he'd known 3 night mechanics who'd disappeared during his tenure. He thanked me for documenting it, for creating a space where the story could be told. The emails kept coming. Former employees, family members of the disappeared, even a few researchers who'd been tracking similar phenomena at other locations. Each one added a piece to the puzzle, a new perspective on the mystery of K-47. One email, received 8 months after I created the website, stood out. It was from someone claiming to be a former military researcher who'd worked at K-47 in the 1950s during the original project. He was 96 years old, living in a veterans home in Arizona. He said he'd been waiting for someone to ask the right questions, someone who'd survived long enough to seek answers. We spoke on the phone for 3 hours. What he told me chilled me to the bone. The anomaly at K-47 wasn't a portal or a doorway. It was something older, something that had always been there. The indigenous tribes had known about it, had created their own rules for avoiding it. The military had discovered it by accident and in their hubris had tried to study it. We called it the Collector, the old man told me, his voice thin and wavering. Because that's what it did. It collected people. Not killed them, not destroyed them, collected them. We never understood why or for what purpose. But we learned that it had patterns, cycles. It would be quiet for months or years, then active for brief periods. And during those active periods, it would call people, use their memories, their losses, their fears. It would show them exactly what they needed to see to step across the threshold. Threshold to where? I asked. We don't know. We sent probes into the affected areas, the rooms beneath Hangar 13, and they just stopped existing. No signals, no data, nothing. Like they'd passed into a space where our instruments couldn't follow. He paused, and I heard him breathing heavily. The last researcher we sent in, Dr. Elizabeth Garrett, she was wearing a camera, a microphone, biometric sensors. For 17 minutes, everything worked fine. She was exploring the underground chambers, documenting the geometry, which didn't make sense but was at least recordable. Then she found what she called the center room. What was in it? We don't know. The moment she entered, all her equipment failed simultaneously. We heard her scream once, then silence. We sealed the facility after that. Some of the people in charge wanted to destroy it, but others argued that we didn't know what would happen if we tried. What if destroying the containment made things worse? What if it spread? So we buried the research, closed the project, and left the anomaly where it was. With innocent people working on top of it. Yes, he said quietly. That's the part I've regretted for 70 years. We knew it was dangerous. We knew it would keep calling people, but we told ourselves it was contained, that as long as certain precautions were followed, it could be managed. The rules were based on our research. Things we learned about the anomaly's behavior patterns. We thought we were helping. Were you? A long silence. Then, I don't know. Maybe the rules save some people, or maybe they just delay the inevitable. Maybe the anomaly is patient enough that it doesn't matter. The old researcher died 2 months after our conversation. In his will, he left me a box of documents, original files from the K-47 project, papers that should have been destroyed or classified decades ago. More pieces of the puzzle. But even with all the information I've gathered, I still don't have answers. I know what K-47 is, a thin place, a boundary, a collection point for something vast and incomprehensible. I know the rules work, at least temporarily. I know people continue to disappear. What I don't know is how to stop it. Sometimes I think about going back, about walking through those hangars one more time, following the path down to the underground chambers, finding the center room that Dr. Garrett discovered. Maybe if someone documented what was there, understood it fully, they could find a way to close the anomaly permanently. But then I remember the figures I saw emerging from the impossible plane. I remember Eddie's face, Marcus's silhouette, all the others who'd been transformed into something that existed between worlds. And I wonder if understanding is worth the price. Last week I received another email. It was from a young mechanic named David Chen, no relation to Robert as far as I know, who'd just been hired at K-47. He'd found my website, read the documentation, and was writing to ask if he should take the job. I spent an hour composing my response, trying to find the right words. In the end, I wrote, "The rules work if you follow them exactly." Many people have survived K-47 by doing exactly that. But survival at K-47 means living with fear, with constant vigilance, with the knowledge that one mistake could be your last. It means accepting that you're working at a place where reality is negotiable and the boundaries between here and somewhere else are thin enough to see through. I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you what I know. K-47 is real, the phenomena are real, and the disappeared are real. If you choose to work there, do so with your eyes open and the rules memorized. Trust Nina or whoever's in her position now. Don't investigate. Don't try to understand. Just survive your shifts and leave. And if you hear your name called in the darkness, remember, whatever's using your voice isn't you. And wherever it's calling you to go, you can never come back from. I don't know if he took the job. I don't know if my warnings helped or hurt. I just know that K-47 is still there, still operating, still posting the rules on the wall for each new mechanic to read, the rules that have been written and rewritten over 70 years. The rules that save some and fail others. The rules that are all that stand between workers and whatever waits in the darkness of Hangar 13. I keep the notebook Sarah sent me on my desk. I read it sometimes, reminding myself that the cost of those rules is measured in real lives, real people who took jobs and never came home. Sometimes I add to the archive, documenting new disappearances as I hear about them, maintaining the record for whoever comes next. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I stand at my window and look east toward Nevada, toward the desert, toward K-47. And I wonder how many mechanics are working there tonight, following the rules, hoping to survive until sunrise. I wonder how many will make it. And I wonder if, somewhere beneath Hangar 13 in the rooms that follow impossible geometry, all the lost mechanics are still there. Collected, transformed, waiting for the next person to join them. Waiting for the next person to hear their name called in the darkness. Waiting. Always waiting. The rules remain posted at K-47 Airfield. They are currently being followed by 2 night mechanics. James Rodriguez, age 24, hired March 15th, 3 months ago, and Kara Thompson, age 31, hired May 10, 6 weeks ago. Both have reported phenomena consistent with previous accounts. Both are still alive. Nina Reeves lives in Portland. She has not returned to Nevada. She does not sleep well. Eddie Thornton is still listed as missing. His sister calls the Nye County Sheriff's Department once a month asking for updates. There are never any updates. Sarah Voss is still listed as missing. Her mother has started a Facebook page dedicated to finding her. The page has 73 followers and no leads. K-47 Airfield continues to operate. Planes land, planes take off. Maintenance is performed. The rules are followed, mostly. And in Hangar 13, in the darkness beneath the sealed doors, in the rooms that shouldn't exist, something waits. It has patience. It has time, it has rules, and eventually everyone breaks them.